And it all begins with a horrifying scene. A beautiful girl sits on a chair in heavy chains, and under deadly electric shocks, she is struggling with her last strength. She turned to Woo Hyun, saying that she could no longer hold back or endure this pain. With tears in her eyes, she begged the protagonist to forgive her weakness. And all the main hero could do at that moment was scream in helplessness while cursing this unfair and disgusting world. A similar tragic situation happened to another guy, Woo Hyun's loyal friend, Sean. He begged for only one thing, that at least the protagonist could survive in this nightmarish place. The hero screamed at the top of his lungs, "I categorically refuse to accept the death of my comrades!" But time, as if mocking him, kept moving on. All that was left was to come to terms with the cruel reality. Tears welled up in his eyes. He begged his comrades not to leave him alone, but no answer came anymore, because his friends had said goodbye to their lives once and for all. Filled with the deepest sorrow and despair, the hero shouted at the top of his voice, finally realizing that this disgusting world had now become his true, inevitable reality. Reverse Planet is a game that took first place worldwide in the full immersion virtual reality genre, thanks to an incredibly vast variety of unique abilities and exciting quests. It instantly gained worldwide popularity and the love of 1 million players. The protagonist decided to enter this game on the strong recommendation of his friend, but in the end, he got trapped, where Reverse Planet revealed itself as a truly terrifying reality. People in strict suits congratulated test subject number 62, our protagonist. One of them cynically congratulated Woo Hyun on becoming one step closer to the great goal, becoming a superhuman. It turns out the main hero, against his will, became a participant in a monstrous project that, without hesitation, sacrificed the lives of 1,000 people just to create a single, absolutely strongest human. On a huge number of people, they carried out sophisticated torture, tests of dangerous drugs, and all kinds of inhuman experiments that made the blood run cold. A cold-blooded worker of this place approached another corpse and ordered the body to be burned along with the other failed specimens. The protagonist mentally cursed these disgusting people, making himself a terrible vow that he would never, under any circumstances, forgive these atrocities. The main hero was literally shaking, emotions overflowing his body, and with a crazed gleam in his eyes, he swore that no matter what, he would survive and take brutal revenge on those bastards. Sometime later, an alarm blared throughout the entire complex. The test subjects had escaped. The guys ran toward the exit with all their might because they sincerely and with all their hearts craved freedom. Woo Hyun was incredibly happy because only a few meters remained to the long-awaited freedom. But suddenly they had to slam on the brakes. Right in front of them appeared a strange man, genuinely surprised that the pathetic test subjects had managed to make it this far at all. The man promised that he would personally finish off every test subject who had dared to try to escape. All the guys readied their weapons, clearly understanding. This was their last fight for freedom. The group rushed forward while asking the hero to cover their rear. The enemy considered the test subjects complete fools and arrogantly promised to kill them all with a single strike. After the fierce battle, the protagonist lay on the ground, but his hands held the enemy's throat in a death grip. At last, the life left the bastard's body under the choking hold, but the price of long-awaited freedom was far too high. Literally every comrade of the protagonist in this fight had parted with their life. Woo Hyun felt absolutely disgusting because his comrades had died for him again. Suddenly he heard the voice of one of his friends, and shadows of dead comrades appeared before his face, demanding vengeance for their ruined lives. In the hero's head, the ghost screamed like mad, demanding that he take revenge for them immediately. Many years passed after that fateful moment. We are transported to one of those laboratories where soldiers opened heavy fire. The hero moved at an enormous, inhuman speed, literally ignoring the bullets flying at him. With terrifying speed, he stripped those bastards of their pathetic lives. Seeing the inevitable death of his comrades, one of the enemies panicked and tried to run, but the hero cut his miserable life short. He drove a sharp weapon straight into his neck. It seemed that killing people had become the most ordinary and routine thing for the protagonist. And although all this time he had methodically exterminated members of the so-called organization, the shadows of his dead comrades continued to tirelessly demand vengeance for their lives. The main hero sincerely did not understand how much longer he would have to live like this, surrounded by blood and death. Was he really destined to kill those bastards without a break until the very end of his life? When suddenly, completely unexpectedly, a system window appeared before the protagonist's eyes, and what it contained plunged him into a profound shock. The hero received the final quest: kill the main culprit, the very man who created this organization. The reward for success would be a chance to return to his homeworld after many years. Countless mutilated bodies lay on the ground. The man's body was trembling with primal terror. He was on his knees and genuinely could not understand why he had done all of this. The head of this horrific organization, in terror, asked about the motives for such cruelty from the protagonist. The guy roughly grabbed the bastard by the collar. I'm amazed by such a hypocritical question. It was test subject number 81 named Kim Yeon-jun. The man, hysterical, ordered the test subject to shut up, arrogantly declaring that he does not speak to trash like him. He was addressing the protagonist, who at that very moment was staring in his direction with a cold, soul-chilling gaze full of contempt. The director screamed, trying to justify himself that in the end he had become a true superhuman who had surpassed every limit of the human body, and all of that was thanks to him. He had become that one and only strongest one. Trying to save himself, the director promised to grant absolutely any wish the hero desired, but the protagonist coldly stated that he didn't need any of it at all. Realizing his inevitable end, the man immediately began screaming at the hero in powerless rage, calling him a dumb animal. He shouted that the organization would never stop, even if he died right here and now. He pitifully tried to threaten the protagonist's family and those who were somehow close to him, but he couldn't even finish. In an instant, he lost his life, and the rotten spirit left the body of that disgusting man. Woo Hyun's comrade standing nearby was completely drenched in someone else's blood, so he immediately started complaining about it to the protagonist. But all that worried the hero now were the glowing inscriptions and diagrams that gave him a real chance to return to his homeworld. His hand was raised to his ear, and it was betraying him, trembling, because it was an incredibly difficult decision. After all, he had lived in that hell for many decades already, having grown used to war. The voices of his fallen comrades would not stop ringing in the protagonist's head. They kept begging him to avenge them and kill every bastard responsible for their deaths. But the final truth was that he was deadly tired of endless battles and wanted only one thing: for it all to end. A comrade yanked the hero out of his deep thoughts and said that he was going to return to his homeworld. But his friend, of course, did not believe this nonsense, considering it impossible. Woo Hyun, with pain in his heart, agreed and returned to his world, asking his friend one last time to tell the others where exactly he had disappeared to. In the next moment, Woo Hyun miraculously found himself in his soft bed. He immediately got up, struggling to remember this long-forgotten room. He was still stunned by the fact that he had truly returned home, and the first question in his mind was how much time had passed in this world. Looking at the date, the protagonist realized in surprise that it was the very day when he had first ended up in the other world. Time here had not moved at all. Looking at himself in the mirror, the protagonist was amazed that all his countless scars and wrinkles had simply vanished, as if everything that had happened to him had been nothing more than a long, nightmarish dream. But vivid images of the past immediately flashed in his mind, where with a chain, he took the lives of dozens of people in an instant. The face of the first girl who died before his eyes, and the twisted face of the bastard who swore that all the protagonist's friends would die. The hero wandered around the room in confusion, fully understanding that that world clearly had not been a dream. Suddenly, Newman called his phone. That name seemed vaguely familiar to Woo Hyun. He immediately picked up, and the girl's first move was to start yelling at him, hoping the guy hadn't forgotten about their planned meeting. The girl flatly declared that he had to meet her today, so she didn't even give Woo Hyun a chance to reply and abruptly hung up. It seemed that the protagonist had finally remembered that voice. It was that very close friend of his. She was the one who had recommended that ill-fated game to him. Sometime later, in a different place, the protagonist searched the crowd with his eyes for his friend. She spotted him right away and started calling out loudly to him, complaining at the same time that they hadn't seen each other for too long. She cheerfully suggested that the guy have a drink with her, but he politely refused. And he understood perfectly well that if he started drinking in his current unstable mental state, an irreparable tragedy could happen to the people around him. They grilled food together when suddenly the girl asked whether the guy had played the new sensational game called Reverse Planet. Woo Hyun cautiously said that he had created a character and watched the broadcast, nothing more. Because it was exactly after that he had been thrown into the game's world in the past. The girl jokingly provoked him, saying it seemed to her that he hadn't played at all and was lying to her. For a moment, the hero was swallowed by a flash of blind rage over the years of torment he had spent in that world. But the girl, without any ill intent, kept complaining that the guy had promised to be present at her stream. Now the hero understood why the girl had begged him so much to play Reverse Planet. Only now did he fully accept the unbelievable fact that he had truly returned home. Sometime later, already at home, the hero sat at his computer. He angrily searched the internet for any available information about the developers of that game. But the hero understood that it was complete nonsense, especially if he showed up at the developer's office claiming that he had really ended up in the world of that very game. Even if the developers had some connection to that world, it would be even more dangerous for him. He sincerely did not understand why he was even doing this. After all, he should have simply been happy that he had miraculously escaped that horrible world. He just wanted to forget that cursed place and live his new peaceful life. After that day, the main hero tried to live the most ordinary life of a regular person and simply exist in this new world. But even so, the dark shadows of the past pressed down on the protagonist, trying to convince him that this peaceful world was unreal. The hero sharply looked over his shoulder, sensing someone's presence, but there was absolutely no one there. Before the hero's eyes, as if in reality, images of his former comrades appeared again, demanding bloody vengeance. In the end, unable to endure the tension, Woo Hyun sprang to his feet. Such strange and sudden behavior caused clear confusion among the people around him. Meanwhile, the protagonist was in an empty corridor, breathing heavily. Again, he felt the bizarre touch of a cold ghost, so he immediately grabbed the wrist and yanked the body of a random innocent guy toward himself. Reflexively, he reached for the dagger that, by habit, he searched for at his belt, and instantly struck with lightning speed straight at the opponent's neck. But in reality, there was no knife in his hand, and the frightened boys genuinely did not understand what had just happened. The main hero hurriedly apologized, stammering that the guy had simply startled him unexpectedly. The boy cautiously noted that lately the protagonist had indeed been acting really strange and frightening. Sometime later, he opened a can of cola with a sharp click. He sat completely alone on a bench in the park. But even in such a calm atmosphere, the ghosts of the past would not let him go. They kept screaming hysterically for vengeance, not stopping for even a second. Suddenly, his friend appeared, greeting the hero with a radiant smile on her face. She remarked that lately, Woo Hyun had been looking rather pale, as if he had seen a real ghost. The protagonist asked her not to worry, forcing a smile and saying that everything was fine. The girl firmly promised that if anything happened to the hero, she would definitely figure it out and help. The protagonist said goodbye to his friend with a warm smile, though the nagging ghost still would not leave him for even a moment. Sometime later, the hero was already standing near the immersion capsule for virtual reality. He moved forward decisively, sincerely believing that he himself had brought those ghosts with him into this world. If this continued, then this world would be no different from that other hell. He was immediately inside the virtual reality device, and with a crazed look, he decided to return and put an end to all this horror once and for all. The system politely welcomed the protagonist to the game. The hero was quite surprised that he had entered the game like an ordinary user, because last time he had been thrown straight into the other world. It even seemed to make Woo Hyun angry, because he had made such a heavy, fateful decision to return to that disgusting world. And in the end, nothing happened. So the protagonist decided to go through the standard tutorial, assuming that maybe then he could get into that world. The hero selected the parameter Combat Assistance, 0%, exactly like last time, and the system offered him a choice of his first basic ability. The game system was designed in such a cunning way that by choosing the first ability, the player could later strengthen the character using various customization elements. Combinations of elements were called builds, and professional players created carefully tuned, highly effective builds. In the end, the protagonist chose the same ability he had in his previous life. In the very next instant, a familiar voice rang out, addressing test subject number 48. They told the hero that he had awakened after the previous test, and that an entire week had passed since they had last seen each other. The protagonist was genuinely surprised that the game did not show the very horrifying awakening process that he remembered. The voice suggested moving on to the next test, and heavy doors opened in front of the protagonist. There, a huge robot appeared. It was a mindless killing machine, created specifically to test awakening. Countless of the hero's comrades had died at the hands of such steel monsters. The first mission was to destroy this robot. A bright flash hit the hero's mind at once, and a painful image from the past appeared. His comrade's face twisted in fear, begging him to save him. Back then, this robot had slaughtered countless test subjects. At that time, that machine seemed like the most terrifying nightmare that could exist in the present. The robot began its mechanical movement toward the protagonist, who stood still for a moment, lost in thoughts about his past. Woo Hyun coldly stated that it didn't matter where the researchers were. In the game or in that world, they always did the same human things. The robot attacked at enormous speed, but the hero easily dodged. It seemed the enemy was not going to stop there, and it attacked again. Even as it greatly increased its speed, Woo Hyun deftly, as if dancing, dodged literally every strike from his opponent. Then he closed in on the hunk of metal, remembering that although it could boast a huge number of combat capabilities, it was still imperfect. He attacked at once with tremendous force, shouting furiously that even so, it was still only an early primitive version. The robot's fragments instantly scattered all around the room. The test was over, and the system, impressed, called his results amazing. Mission 1, destroying the robot, was successfully completed. The hero was immediately informed that it was time for the next test. A nasty siren blared at once, announcing that intruders had appeared. Some girl spoke over the loudspeaker to all the victims who had ended up in that horrific place. She begged people to do everything possible just to break free. The second mission's condition was that the hero had to leave this dangerous place alive. The protagonist rushed through the corridors at enormous speed and was shocked that the sounds of explosions suddenly stopped. The hero noticed one soldier lying motionless near a pile of robot bodies. It turned out he was a good man, a rebel who had come to free the guys, and he assumed that the hero was a test subject. The man sincerely wanted to help the protagonist, so he pulled out a huge amount of weapons, allowing the test subjects to take any of them for defense. He also handed over some strange device, saying that with it the hero could contact the support bureau. Right after that, the man died, having fulfilled his duty to the end. The main hero silently stared at the weapons for a moment, when suddenly a robot appeared behind him, as if it had spotted him. The protagonist, as usual, grabbed the chain with a sharp sickle at the end. A sudden fit of rage washed over the main hero. He felt overwhelming nausea and disgust at this entire farce. Meanwhile, a girl logged into the game, still stunned that she had even decided to enter and play this game. It was a well-known professional game streamer from the USA, famous since late July. Someone sneeringly remarked that the girl herself had chosen this game, while she justified herself and shouted that this game was a punishment that her beloved subscribers had chosen by vote. She sincerely stated that she never breaks promises she makes to her viewers, no matter how difficult they are. The girl arrogantly believed that she could perform well in this game. She didn't change her character's appearance and went straight to choosing an ability right now. She chose 50% system assistance, which greatly helps in combat, and the viewers in chat started rebelling and asking her to set combat assistance to 0%. It seemed she didn't even understand whether it was possible to clear the tutorial without the system's help at all. She quickly looked it up online, and it turned out that the percentage of users who voluntarily refused the game's combat assistance was practically zero. Even though the girl was confident in her rich gaming experience, without that targeting system, she would not be able to fight effectively at all. The girl was stunned by the stubborn demand of her subscribers that she plays without combat correction, and at once she received a personal quest to clear the tutorial with no assistance, for which she could get an impressive sum of 500,000 won. In the end, because of simple greed, the girl immediately agreed, believing that she at least had to try. And for that kind of money, she was incredibly happy at such an opportunity to earn. But sometime later, she was extremely frustrated. It turned out the starter robot finished her off in just 2 minutes of a humiliating fight. In chat, people wrote that many pros had also failed when trying to clear the tutorial without the game's assistance, so it was expected. The girl decided that in any case, her main goal right now was simply to escape this place. In the story, the system notified the girl that automatic party matchmaking for the mission had begun, and she was incredibly happy because now there were real chances of victory. But the game couldn't find a team for a long time because the other party members' assistance level had to be the same as the girl's, meaning 0. The audience believed that Yulia had no chance of finding a partner, and she was already threatening to cancel the quest, when suddenly the system notified her that it had still managed to find one unique party member. Suddenly, the girl's joyful expression began to shift into deep shock. She could not believe what she saw right in front of her. A huge number of robots had been brutally destroyed. She couldn't understand how that was even possible, because even pros were not able to clear the tutorial without the game's assistance. The girl refused to believe that someone could destroy those robots without firearms and without help from the targeting system. But even so, she immediately decided to find that mysterious hero, believing that with his help, she would definitely be able to clear the mission. Meanwhile, the protagonist's blade was covered in blood. He stood amid a massive number of corpses, surrounded by an incredibly dark aura. The moment the hero noticed movement, he sharply looked in that direction. It was our girl, who froze and didn't know how to properly start a conversation. She nervously tried to say hello while the hero's deadly blade was already right in front of her face. Ready to strike, the protagonist managed to stop at the very last moment, a split second before ending her virtual life. She froze in terror, not understanding what had just happened, and then immediately ducked away, apologizing in a trembling voice. While the hero dryly acknowledged his mistake, Woo Hyun said goodbye to Yulia and was about to leave. But she insisted on going with him, arguing that they were in the same questline of the system anyway. She told him about herself and that she was live streaming, while also asking whether the protagonist minded. She also reassured him, explaining that she had enabled personal information protection mode, and the hero's real face was hidden from the viewers. The girl immediately tensed up when the protagonist abruptly stopped, because a huge number of enemies appeared in front of them. They immediately started shooting at the two of them, and the girl, frightened by the gunshots, began to hide, reflexively covering her head with her hands. She remembered the hero and cautiously looked in his direction. Woo Hyun, with unnatural ease, twisted away from a stream of bullets and immediately aimed his weapon at the enemies. One of the opponents lost his life in an instant. A person simply could not believe that such skill was possible in this game. The girl thought what was happening was some kind of nonsense or a miracle. The viewers also couldn't understand how someone could move like that without the help of the game interface. The hero kept methodically slicing through the enemies while the viewers heatedly discussed what kind of secret ability this guy was using. In the end, they realized with surprise that the protagonist was using an ability called Absolute Being. The entire game community believed that people who used this ability were losers and trash. But now, the protagonist's actions completely disproved that opinion. Absolute Being was one of the game's countless skills. It greatly increased the character's physical stats, but in return, it completely blocked the ability to use magic. That was exactly why users sincerely considered this skill useless garbage. The girl couldn't understand how someone could voluntarily use a skill that forbade abilities in a game where abilities played the key role. The streamer thought deeply about the fact that the hero had chosen to play without the system's help, meaning he controlled all his actions himself, which made the skills pure. Physical stats could actually be useful to him. But even so, she couldn't understand how the hero was able to move like that while being only level 1. Meanwhile, Woo Hyun continued slicing through his opponents with frightening ease. His chains literally tore the enemy's flesh into pieces. At the end of this lightning-fast fight, the hero remained standing, towering over countless bodies of defeated enemies. The guy stared closely at the blood-stained blades of the sickle. The ghosts of fallen comrades kept pressing on him, whispering that it wasn't enough and that he had to kill even more people. The protagonist froze in place for a moment, lost in his thoughts, when suddenly a wounded enemy appeared from around the corner. He immediately took the hero in his sights, and at that critical moment, the girl intervened, instantly opening fire on the enemy. He immediately retreated under the hail of bullets coming his way. Using the element of surprise, the girl closed in on the man and immediately ended his life with a precise shot straight to the head. The viewer's reaction was mixed. Even though she made the kill beautifully, they were sure the hero would have handled it easily even alone. Misha looked hopefully toward Woo Hyun, then, with a timid smile, asked whether she had been able to help him. A painful image immediately appeared in the protagonist's mind. A girl from the past, Mila, had spoken to him in the same way. She too, like the others, had been a test subject, and in the end, she died tragically. The girl tried to pull the protagonist out of the depths of his thoughts. She was worried because she thought the guy was shaken by the kills. But in truth, he didn't care at all. Woo Hyun dryly supported Yulia, saying that she really had helped him. The girl immediately brightened up and asked whether the guy would allow her to continue the tutorial with him, and he indifferently gave his okay. The main hero introduced himself to the girl by name, and she immediately asked with curiosity whether it was really Woo Hyun. He had chosen Absolute Being as his first ability, and he confirmed it. The girl still couldn't understand how the hero was able to dodge bullets bullets and fight effectively at all without active abilities. The hero calmly replied that there was nothing unusual about it, and immediately stated that about 20 meters from them, 2 robots were lying in ambush. The girl was deeply shocked at how Woo Hyun, without detection skills or radar, had so precisely understood where their enemies were, while the hero suggested continuing on, confidently stating that the robots were not a problem either. In the end, the girl was even more surprised when she confirmed with her own eyes that Woo Hyun had been absolutely right. The protagonist recalled with nostalgia that back in the day, he really loved playing in collision mode. The moment the enemy attacked, the hero easily dodged and immediately counterattacked, knocking the opponent away with a powerful kick. Woo Hyun continued his story, saying that it was a time when he was truly into games, and then admitted that he had once been a famous prankster. Right after those words, Woo Hyun smashed his armored opponent to pieces with just one devastating punch. The stream audience believed that for Ran, Kira, and Collision, even a miracle like that was possible, which the girl, a newbie to this, sincerely could not understand. Viewers in chat excitedly explained that Ran, Kira, and Colosseum were incredibly strong players, legends that everyone respected. Soon as the girl learned that her companion was also a Colosseum ranker, she was in complete, indescribable shock. Woo Hyun, however, cut off that wave of admiration and bluntly stated that they needed to keep moving. In the end, they reached the final objective. In front of them stood a man with a shaved head who was genuinely astonished that these two had actually made it to this place alive. It turned out he was the boss, the head of security, who loudly swore to finish off the insolent brats. He shouted that they would very soon meet their dead comrades in the afterlife. It seemed that the very sight of this man stirred a wave of primal rage in the protagonist's eyes. Ghostly souls of fallen friends and comrades appeared again, screaming hysterically for the protagonist to kill that bastard as soon as possible. The enemy immediately moved at enormous speed. The girl began firing rapid shots from a rifle, but the bullets could not harm this man's tough body in the slightest. In the end, the girl got scared and hurriedly retreated, saying in a trembling voice that she would cover the hero from the rear. The main hero focused and prepared to strike, then immediately attacked the opponent's torso with incredible force. From the sheer power of the blow, a deafening blast thundered at the point of impact. Such a spectacle left the girl in shock. Meanwhile, the audience couldn't understand why the man's defensive barrier activated if no one had fired heavy weaponry at him. The enemy survived the hero's attack, but it provoked him intensely. He immediately rushed at the protagonist in fury, wanting to tear him to pieces. But Woo Hyun had no trouble dodging that crazed charge. The opponent was about to land another strike when suddenly his arm seemed to transform into a massive drill. He immediately began destroying everything in his path, trying to reach the protagonist. Woo Hyun, in turn, clenched his fist with all his strength, and then, catching the moment, delivered a crushing strike straight to the man's chin. As a result, because of the hero's monstrous power, the man's momentum was instantly stopped. The protagonist mockingly asked the enemy not to turn off his iron defense skill. Like a real madman, he said it would be wrong and boring if the guy died too quickly. The enemy couldn't understand for the life of him how a pathetic test subject had obtained such unbelievable godlike power. Meanwhile, the hero gave a cold answer. Because it was thanks to this man and many other teachers that he had gained this cursed power through suffering. Blood immediately sprayed in a fountain. From her spot, the girl was stunned that she had cleared the hardest tutorial so easily thanks to her companion. She happily declared that since the hero had taken down the boss, all they had left was to leave this place as winners. She addressed the protagonist so they could move on, and he began walking away slowly, still feeling an unquenchable thirst for blood. Sometime later, they managed to get out safely. They gained a new level, and the girl became wildly curious whether the hero would keep playing the game. Today, he surprised and disappointed the streamer, saying that he was done playing for today. The girl, hiding her disappointment, said goodbye to her viewers. The hero was curious what exactly the girl wanted from him, as the streamer sincerely asked the protagonist to become a frequent guest on her stream, seeing huge potential in him. She enthusiastically explained that she mostly takes part in co-op quests or thrilling PvP battles. She promised decent pay for participation and a schedule convenient for the hero, but he, without even thinking, coldly rejected the advantageous offer. But he did agree to the simple request to add her as a friend in the game. In the end, they said a warm goodbye to each other, and the protagonist was left completely alone. in that empty location. Woo-hyun sincerely didn't understand why even after completing the tutorial, he still hadn't returned to that world, as he had planned. Back then, the protagonist didn't even suspect that today's gameplay recording would drastically change his life. At that moment, a message popped up on the screen. Anonymous Viewer 62 donated $3,000, and the message read, "What's it like to return to the real world?" The story takes us early in the morning to the Korean branch of the company that developed the popular game Planet Earth. A real, uncontrollable chaos reigned in the huge office space, and the cause of all this commotion was the actions of just one single player. The developers considered the protagonist's actions something absolutely incredible and impossible, even though they re-watched the recording of his gameplay countless times. They simply couldn't believe their eyes. The hero managed to defeat such a powerful opponent completely without help from the game mechanics, without using special skills, and even without a weapon. Because of this unbelievable effect, ordinary users en masse accused him of using forbidden programs, and one of the men, with clear alarm in his voice, asked the responsible employee whether he was 100% sure it definitely wasn't cheats. The employee firmly replied that the protagonist had absolutely played honestly, without any third-party software. He reported that their department had checked absolutely everything, down to the smallest details, pulled the logs from the exact moment the character was created, and everything was crystal clear. He excitedly said that over the game's long history, they had faced a huge number of the most sophisticated cheaters, but they had never once seen movements and combat mechanics like this. The guy shouted emotionally that even with cheats, it was impossible to pull off something like that, while the man concluded that if the hero wasn't a cheater, then he was simply a real psychopath. Still, his colleagues leaned toward the idea that there was, however tiny, a chance of a new hacking method. The man categorically stated that this was exactly why they needed the most thorough and deep inspection. Sometime later, our protagonist was calmly sitting in a cozy cafe with his friend. He was genuinely amazed that the entire internet community had been turned upside down solely because of his recent actions. His friend declared with undisguised excitement that the internet was in complete pitch black chaos right now. People began en masse launching similar challenges, trying to repeat his success, but none of them succeeded, which is why they kept fiercely accusing the protagonist of playing unfairly. The girl was also in a state of complete shock when she saw that video. The hero sincerely didn't understand how she had managed to recognize him at all, since his face had been reliably hidden. His friend explained that at one moment he had accidentally said his name during the broadcast, and his unique fighting style had remained unmistakable. Thanks to that key detail, the hero finally understood exactly how they had managed to contact him. At first, the girl didn't understand who exactly had reached out to the protagonist, but as soon as she learned it was the official Korean branch of the developers, she literally jumped up from her seat. She was stunned by the scale of what was happening. The hero said that he had received that message through the streamer, and his friend became ecstatic because a major gaming company had openly offered an official anti-cheat inspection, which would undoubtedly attract colossal audience attention. The protagonist, however, thought deeply that now he had a real chance to meet the developers in person and perhaps learn some secret information about that other world. That was exactly why he agreed to accept their invitation. The girl assumed it would be best to immediately and harshly refute all accusations if the hero planned to continue streaming, but he didn't seem very interested in a media career, and he still kept his face hidden. However, the girl stated with authority that even with a hidden appearance, the hero's unique fighting style was far too noticeable and recognizable. Even when professionals tried to hide their identities, it was very easy to recognize them solely by their specific combat tactics. The friend was genuinely glad that the protagonist agreed to the inspection because otherwise the streamer's career would have come to an inevitable end. The hero still didn't understand how he was connected to that side at all, until his friend explained a simple truth. When a sensation that loud happens, the crowd goes after anyone who is even indirectly connected to it. She warned that very soon the angry people would target her too, and it seemed he absolutely didn't want the innocent girl to suffer because of him. Precisely for that noble reason, he expressed the desire to broadcast his inspection live, and his agreement made the girl incredibly happy. She was absolutely sure that with such furious hype, the number of viewers on the stream would be sky high. The girl immediately started furiously typing something quickly on the keyboard. She was making a big, loud announcement that that very legendary player would undergo an anti-cheat inspection live on air. 4 days later, the protagonist logged into the game. The girl assumed the guy had been mentally struggling lately, but it turned out that what was happening around them didn't worry him much. Woo-hyun was far more interested in why the girl herself didn't suspect him of anything, and she firmly insisted that she had seen his strength personally and believed him unconditionally. In her own mind, the girl shuddered as she remembered what the hero had looked like at that moment. He had resembled some kind of crazed, insane killer. The girl suggested not dragging it out and finally starting the broadcast. She cheerfully greeted her viewers, each of whom believed that right now, at this very minute, the protagonist would be exposed and shamed. The girl admitted that from the very start of the stream, there were already more than 10,000 viewers. Woo-hyun also greeted the viewers dryly, and they immediately swarmed him in chat, fiercely accusing him of using cheats. The girl sternly threatened the vile chat, promising that she would simply ban them from sending messages if they didn't calm down. She asked how the protagonist himself viewed this noisy situation. While he sincerely found it absurd and funny that something like this could cause such heated arguments at all. Then the girl solemnly announced that today they had invited a special guest to conduct an independent inspection, and he was about to arrive any moment now. A man from the developers team materialized right next to them. His name was Kim Hyun, and he held the position of the game's operations team manager. The protagonist planned, immediately after the inspection, to ask this man several important questions. The guys politely greeted each other. The man studied the protagonist closely, thinking that at least outwardly, he looked like a perfectly normal, sane person. The employee invited them to follow him to the special inspection zone, and they instantly teleported to another space where some players usually trained. The hero, carefully looking around, caught himself thinking that he had never seen a place like this in that world before. The man officially asked whether the protagonist agreed to undergo the testing, and he gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. The man was about to start the process, and a robot immediately began coming out toward them. It turned out to be a mid-tier model that far surpassed in strength all the robots the hero had fought earlier. The protagonist's eyes immediately grew chilling. His figure began to be covered in a sinister black aura, and the voices of his dead comrades sounded again in his head. The employee was just about to give the command for the hero to begin the fight when suddenly the ground beneath the man bucked upward, and in a single instant the main hero vanished from his spot without a trace. A flying chunk of stone again didn't even let the employee get a word out. Stones kept crashing outward in all directions, speaking volumes about how fierce and furious this battle was. In the end, the protagonist managed with his bare hands to literally beat down such a powerful and dangerous opponent, and moreover, the device recorded absolutely no external interference. Looking at the crazed expression on the protagonist's face, the manager was absolutely sure that the source of such incredible skill was definitely not cheats. The main hero calmly removed his foot from the defeated robot's body and coldly stated that he had successfully completed the assigned task. The man reported that he could not detect any traces of cheats, but one problem remained. The battle time was suspiciously short. He suggested that the hero fight in a specific way that they would prescribe, and the protagonist agreed, being absolutely confident in his honed skills. There were cheats that automatically controlled a character's body, but they were very easy to expose by simply forcing the player to abruptly change fighting style. The man asked the protagonist to cut off the robot's head using his chain, and the hero understood his new task with perfect clarity. The man genuinely didn't understand who this hero really was. Since he was capable of things like this, 3 mid-rank combat robots appeared on the battlefield at once. The man watched in stunned amazement, realizing he couldn't even imagine the hero's defeat. The robots attacked with all their mechanical might, but the protagonist vanished from his spot again. With incredible ease, he dodged the powerful combined strike, then immediately moved at tremendous speed and just as lightning fast deprived the opponents of their limbs. Woo-hyun looked at the enemies with a wild, crazed gaze, and after a single exchange from him, they were completely shattered and destroyed. The girl screamed in indescribable excitement that it felt as if the chains in his hands were alive. He was such a skilled and virtuoso fighter. The manager understood that they had already collected more than enough data for a successful inspection. However, as an administrator of this game, he unbearably wanted to find out whether the hero could defeat. An advanced tier robot had only one single ability. The man knew perfectly well that he was showing excessive greed and curiosity, but he still couldn't stop. And in the end, the terrifying silhouette of the protagonist's next opponent began to slowly emerge behind the door. This robot looked completely different. Its eyes burned with a sinister red light. It looked far more human and moved slowly and threateningly toward Woo-hyun. It was an advanced tier robot, a later and more perfected version of them. It seemed the protagonist felt something as he looked at that creature. All he saw behind it was a countless number of killed people and a disgusting, soul-chilling smile on that robot's face. Woo Hyun felt a powerful anger rising inside him, because this very creature had destroyed an enormous number of people dear to him. The opponent attacked at truly monstrous speed, and although the main hero managed to dodge, the blow still grazed his cheek. After that came a whole chain of crushing strikes, and the hero again only barely avoided a critical hit. Even the solid metal doors behind the protagonist were smashed to pieces by the massive shockwaves from the attacks. Woo Hyun understood perfectly well that it would be enough to take just one such strike to say goodbye to life forever. But even in that situation, he boldly attacked the creature's body. The hardness of this robot's armor was beyond comprehension, and the hero physically could not deal it any significant damage. The protagonist once again dodged a lethal attack at the very last moment, then prepared to attack again with the firm resolve that he would keep hitting until at least some effect appeared. The fight unfolding before their eyes plunged them into real shock. The man realized in horror that the hero, even using just one ability, was able to fight this unbelievably strong creature on equal terms. It seemed that although at first the protagonist had been retreating, now he was pressing this powerful creation with all his stubborn persistence. In the end, the man decided that further inspection was pointless, so he recalled the robot. He officially reported that he had withdrawn the robot because the data collected in this insane battle was more than enough. The girl immediately demanded the result impatiently, and he stated that Woo Hyun was 100% not a cheater. The girl, with a bright, radiant smile, reminded the viewers that from the very beginning, she had kept saying Woo Hyun was an honest player. She proudly declared that the hero was not a cheater, while possessing skills that were on par with the capabilities of a real cheater. In the end, she wrapped up that legendary stream, which peaked at over 100,000 viewers. The man sincerely thanked the hero for agreeing to undergo this difficult inspection, and then he was about to leave the two of them. But the protagonist, Woo Hyun, stopped. He admitted that he had one important question, and then asked whether this game had ever had any bugs before. For example, the kind where someone got stuck in the game for a long period of time. That question clearly brought confusion to the employee's face. The man firmly stated that if the game really had such a critical bug, it would never have been released. In the end, the employee left the two of them. The girl said she would honestly share the stream income, and the hero had no objection to that arrangement at all. She was sure she couldn't just let this player go because he was a real goldmine. But realizing she couldn't convince the hero to stay right now, she simply said goodbye, hoping they would meet again very soon. He was deeply disappointed that he still hadn't been able to get the information he so desperately wanted to hear. Sometime later, his friend was still in a state of complete excitement over the past stream, and said that the gaming community also felt an incredible thrill from what they had seen. The main hero said he had no intention of becoming a streamer because that kind of thing didn't attract him much, but the resourceful girl suggested a great alternative. The protagonist could just play silently and not pay attention to the chat at all. She swore she would do everything to make the hero agree, and then decided to suggest that he play a mode against other players. It was one of the most popular and competitive modes, where players fought directly against each other. The protagonist now understood the real reason for his friend's sudden challenge, while she was annoyed that the guy really wanted to leave without ever playing with her. He tried to politely refuse, but his friend was unusually persistent. The protagonist thought that maybe he could find some hints in this mode, and in the end, he agreed. The first mode was classic duel fights, 1 versus 1 and 2 versus 2. There were also modes where you could fight in a team of up to 5 people. And today they decided to play Battle Royale, a mode where 100 people end up in a closed area and fight to the death until only one person or team remains. The girl suggested they go as one team, since it was the hero's first time in this mode, and she also wanted to give a couple of useful tips for victory, but he refused any help and set up his build. The protagonist already knew his perfect, deadly build, the one that had earned him the nickname Superhuman in both worlds. The protagonist calmly prepared his build while the girl adjusted the game settings. They decided to start their drop from a popular spot, namely the military base. His friend asked permission to record this match for her YouTube channel, and the guy agreed just so she would finally get off his back. The girl launched the match at once, then cheerfully waved at the protagonist, saying they wouldn't see each other on the battlefield for a while. Woo Hyun immediately found himself in an enclosed room, one-on-one with an enemy player. The opponent instantly looked around, considering this place complete trash, but he reasoned that he needed to head to another zone, while the hero, already silent, stood behind him and was ready to coldly finish the guy. The girl immediately saw pop-up notifications that the protagonist had already killed his first person. Within minutes, system notifications kept coming one after another because the hero was non-stop killing countless other players. The body of one of the players was pierced by something at monstrous speed. It was our protagonist who had finished another kill and coldly thought that nearby players seemed to be running out. In the past, he had run into 4 players at once while dropping, and of course he killed all of them without the slightest hesitation. The hero figured that since he had cleared the area, he should leave, when suddenly his friend urgently contacted him. She screamed that she was surrounded and needed help immediately. He opened the map and checked the girl's current location. Then he pinpointed the part of the building where she was and immediately set off to help. The protagonist immediately ran into 2 hostile players who started preparing their abilities for battle. But the hero instantly drew his blade from its sheath and in the same moment severed one opponent's arm. The second enemy didn't even have time to understand what had just happened. He immediately began using his abilities and attacked with tremendous force, destroying everything in his path. The protagonist easily dodged that wide, destructive attack, and it seemed the opponent began to realize in horror that his end was near. With a single precise motion of his blade, the hero finished the enemy. Woo Hyun stood motionless for a moment, then moved on in search of his friend. The protagonist's killing streak continued, and soon he reached the main entrance, which he immediately reported to his friend. He told the girl to stay where she was while tugging on the handle of a locked door. Woo Hyun suddenly stopped, as if listening to the sounds around him. He felt that on the other side of the door, 5 enemies were already waiting for him. The hero boldly stepped into the building, while an enemy lay hidden in ambush behind the door. The player immediately tried to attack the protagonist, but he caught the attacker's hand with frightening ease, and that level of skill seemed to plunge the enemies into real shock. Woo Hyun immediately, with tremendous force, struck the player in the torso, and the guy died from the severe wounds, while the hero moved on to rescue his friend. Meanwhile, the girl was standing peacefully in place, stunned, scrolling through the huge stream of notifications saying that he had killed someone. She thought that with a kill count like that, the guy looked more like some kind of professional rusher, when suddenly she noticed something strange. The girl reflexively started using her ability, although in reality it was the hero who had already safely dealt with all the enemies in the building. Looking at his unharmed friend, Woo Hyun began to doubt whether she really needed his help at all. In response to his silent question about the chainsaw in her hands, his friend said it was the only weapon she had managed to find, and so she continued playing. In the end, the protagonist killed 25 people all by himself, while the girl had only 7. That way, they confidently managed to win 10 games in a row. The girl was genuinely amazed by the fact that her friend turned out to be a real, ruthless killing machine. She practically begged the guy not to do the main missions in the game for at least a few days, because she wanted to approach him with an official and important proposal. She started logging out of the game, mysteriously promising that she could offer something truly interesting. In the end, Woo Hyun was left completely alone again. He was very upset that he still hadn't gotten any hints at all. After the PvP mode, meanwhile, in one apartment building, the girl sat and happily stared at something on her phone. Absolutely everyone online was discussing the mysterious protagonist and praising him in every way, and she kept shifting from side to side with overflowing joy, believing she had hit the real jackpot. She was sure she would never again be able to get such a crazy peak of 100,000 viewers. She tensely thought about how to persuade Woo Hyun to do one more stream. But she remembered perfectly well how the hero had firmly and categorically refused streaming. She decided to calculate her share of the profits from the stream, when suddenly her face flushed deeply from what she saw on the screen. The next day, his friend called the hero to a cafe, and he had no idea why he had been summoned so urgently. With a bright, wide smile, the girl presented him with an entire streaming presentation. She admitted that she had worked on this presentation all night long, just to somehow impress and convince the hero. She recalled that moment when she herself suggested that the hero not talk to the chat, but simply play for his own enjoyment. She suggested popular reality show formats to him. It was a streaming format where several people gathered and watched someone do something. The girl proposed a very simple but brilliant idea. While the protagonist would just play, she would handle the talking and keep in touch with the viewers. She also suggested bringing in real professionals so the content would become even higher quality and more interesting. The friend generously offered to split the profit 60-40 in the hero's favor. But the guy was already about to refuse because he still wasn't interested in that. When she asked about the profits from that very stream where the hero was checked for cheating, he suddenly remembered that he had received a message from the streamer. He found that message. It turned out she was asking for the account number to transfer the money to, and also decided to share a funny donation message. The friend was shocked that the hero had earned 6,100,000 won in a single stream, while he froze in shock at what he saw. Some anonymous viewer number 62 had sent a donation with a message as if he had known Woo Hyun for a very long time and was insistently demanding that he start constant extremist activity. The protagonist was deeply shaken by the fact that someone not only knew he had returned to the real world, but also knew his serial number, the one assigned to him among the test subjects. Woo Hyun jumped up from his seat, not understanding who that person was, then anxiously asked whether it was possible to find any information about the donation. But unfortunately, that was technically impossible. As soon as the protagonist realized he could communicate with this mysterious person only during streams, he immediately agreed. His friend was incredibly happy about this turn of events. She immediately made an excited post in her community that the popular Woo Hyun would be doing a new stream. It was a beautiful Friday evening, that favorable time when everyone enjoys a well-earned rest after the work week. Those who proudly call themselves cats had already firmly occupied their seats at their computers. And all these people were eagerly waiting for the start of our protagonist stream, which was supposed to begin any minute now, 5 minutes before going live. In the studio, there was a light tension. The hero's friend was visibly nervous, unable to sit still from concerns, while the invited professional supported her in every possible way, confidently saying that they had prepared for this important event 100%. And that guy was a pro, wasn't he? And he was in complete, genuine excitement at the very thought that he had been given the unique honor of taking part in this legendary broadcast. He also couldn't stop marveling at the unbelievable fact that someone had managed to persuade our hidden protagonist to go live. Finally, the X hour struck, and the guys went live, joyfully greeting their 1,000-strong audience. The girl hurried to reassure the anxious viewers, who had started worrying because the protagonist was absent from the studio. She immediately put an image on the screens which was already directly inside the game. She explained in detail that the extreme challenge would take place in an exciting reality show format. The girl was absolutely sure that every viewer was eager to see the gameplay of that very famous empire with their own eyes, so she suggested getting started immediately. Without hesitation, the main hero activated the radio in his hands. From the speaker came a clear order. They had to rescue the survivors and ensure they could safely leave this dangerous forest. The hero's main objective was to slip past the vigilant guards unnoticed and reach the bureau to obtain their protection. Woo Hyun understood perfectly well that in that other world, he had relied exclusively on speed and stealth running. But this time, he decided to do things completely differently. The hero took a deep breath and started screaming with all his forces, deliberately drawing attention to himself. Of course, the staff of this guarded facility heard that loud, brazen noise at once, and an enraged crowd moved toward the source of the sound, straight toward our protagonist. The main hero calmly prepared his weapon for the upcoming battle. His eyes burned with furious rage, and the voices of his dead comrades kept ringing in his head, demanding vengeance. The staff immediately opened heavy rifle fire on the hero, but he dodged the hail of bullets with incredible ease, rapidly closing the distance with those bastards. He virtuously disarmed one of the enemies, and the rifle in the man's hands exploded, instantly ending his filthy life. Meanwhile, somewhere else, an unknown person nervously moved a mouse. He carefully watched the discussion in an online community, and it seemed something had really hooked this mysterious man. It turned out he was deeply provoked by a post from one player claiming that even the pro player Hitler wouldn't be able to defeat our protagonist. Of course, such a bold comment brought a grimace of anger to this professional gamer's face. A few days later, it was time for the second extreme challenge. Woo Hyun caught himself thinking that throughout the entire previous stream, scream. That mysterious anonymous viewer still had not appeared. In the game, he continued to mercilessly slice through his opponents. It seemed the enemies were completely unable to resist the hero's ferocious power and precise skills. Woo Hyun fought like a machine, not even showing signs of fatigue, battling countless hordes of enemies. And the broadcast continued. The protagonist's face was still hidden, and the commentators were in a state of complete shock at the insane tactic Woo Hyun had chosen to clear this challenge. The people in the studio were thrilled that instead of hiding in the bushes, Woo Hyun simply gathered all the enemies into one pile and methodically slaughtered every single one of them. Some guy sent Dan a message, genuinely indignant, claiming that the absolute being skill was simply broken, because from the outside it looked like he didn't even have a cooldown. The professional commentator immediately stated authoritatively that this was not the case at all, although ordinary skills really did have cooldowns, and watching the protagonist's crazy gameplay could make it seem like his ability was too combat focused. In reality, this skill only boosted physical attributes. It did not affect combat intelligence, weapon mastery, or tactical thinking in any way. The man was genuinely convinced that the hero could fight like this in real life too, if he had the same monstrous physical strength. Suddenly, the protagonist's expression changed, and some soldiers surrounded him in a tight ring. One of them, named Kim Chol, introduced himself as a bureau agent and harshly demanded that the hero drop his weapon immediately. The Bureau for Managing the Otherworld was a serious government organization whose main goal was to destruction beings that crossed into their world from outside. For the most part, they dealt with eliminating monsters that had entered through rifts into their dimension. It seemed the protagonist recognized this man, and judging by his reaction, he was quite surprised by this unexpected meeting. The man looked at the guy, quickly realized he was one of the victims of the experiment who had managed to escape, and immediately apologized. The protagonist silently handed him the radio and explained that one of the agents had given it to him right before dying. Kim clearly grew upset when he heard this. He decided to head to the bureau immediately and keep the hero there under supervision until his identity could be officially confirmed. At last, the hero successfully completed this difficult mission, and the next events unfolded already at the bureau headquarters. Woo Hyun sat there, genuinely amazed that he had ended up in this place, because in his previous life, he couldn't even have imagined a twist like this. In that other world, he made a living by carrying out dirty contracts for private companies, after he escaped from the laboratory. The hero also specialized in subjugating and enslaving monsters from Reverse Planet. And now he reflected that in his previous life, he had often encountered with the Bureau, and they had frequently ended up on opposite sides of the barricades. A girl walked into the room with a confident stride. She introduced herself as Hyson and proudly stated that she was part of the Bureau's first elite team. He politely greeted her, while the girl emphasized that the guy had truly come a long and difficult way. She decided not to waste time on empty talk and got straight to the point, saying that the hero had two paths. The first option was to become an ordinary civilian under the Bureau's reliable protection, but with a complete ban on using his abilities. The second option was to become a full-fledged member of the Bureau and use his powers for the greater good. She explained that by choosing the second option, he would be able to serve as a field agent after he completed training in certain nuances of the work. The protagonist thought deeply. In that other world, he had killed one of the Bureau's members with his own hands, and now they wanted to turn him into their loyal ally. The girl, with a faint, barely noticeable blush on her cheeks, asked again which option Woo Hyun would choose in the end. The protagonist firmly decided that he was not going to become an ordinary resident, because then he would probably have to work for some shady organization again, just like in his previous life. In the end, he agreed to become an agent of this place, and the girl was indescribably happy. She admitted that lately, corporations had often been actively searching for and recruiting awakened ones, which was why the Bureau was catastrophically short on people. She also stated authoritatively that many people later bitterly regretted signing contracts with corporations rather than with the Bureau, and Jane believed that corporations simply lacked experience, while the Bureau had a rich and glorious history behind it. Not without boasting, she noted that their organization possessed vast knowledge accumulated over the years in training, awakening, and conquering the Reverse Planet. He remembered well how, in that other world, huge numbers of awakened ones had died ingloriously, carrying out suicidal missions for corporate profit. He hadn't forgotten how they once flat out refused to pay the hero, and he had to use rough force just to collect his honestly earned money. For some time, the Bureau even pursued the protagonist because he was an unregistered awakened one. Yujin handed him a special secure phone that could be used for work. She also explained in detail that first, Woohyun's abilities would need to be officially verified, and then he would have to complete a training course. The girl expressed sincere hope that the talented guy would be assigned to her team. The hero, getting to his feet, also sincerely hoped to himself that he would end up on this girl's team. Because, as it turned out, it was she who had helped the hero and the other unfortunate people escape from that disgusting place. They shook hands firmly, hoping that in the future they would work shoulder to shoulder. Watching all this, the hero's friend sincerely didn't understand how he could talk to NPCs so easily and naturally. Earlier, she believed that communicating with game characters in such a live way was simply impossible, because ordinary NPC scripts would just ignore any words that weren't directly related to the quest. The man was also in deep shock, because the girl behaved like a high-tech, adaptive, fully responsive, and artificial intelligence that could fully react to absolutely any words and unpredictable player actions. The man said that this technology usually consumed a colossal amount of resources, and previously the industry was considered that implementing it in a game of this scale was simply impossible. He suggested that to activate this function, you would have to meet a series of difficult conditions, and most likely the minimum requirement was starting the game with 0 correction. The girl was sure that sensations like this stirred up absolutely the entire gaming sphere, and the man said he would eagerly wait for an official statement from the developer. The hero's friend believed that thanks to this discovery, she might be able to bring a truly big and influential figure into their show. The man assumed that they were done for today, and the girl began saying goodbye to her audience. Meanwhile, the main hero stood in place, not understanding why that anonymous viewer still had not shown up. Because sometime earlier, as soon as he saw the first donation, he immediately asked his friend to inform him about any donations from that person. The theme of the next stream was the PvP mode, and today the hero went to test his strength in an honest duel. The commentators noted that the protagonist was trying this mode for the first time. In total, the game had 8 ranks, and to get even the initial bronze, the protagonist needed to win 10 times in the normal league. The man explained that professionals usually needed about 30 minutes to complete such a task, while an average player needed about 2 hours. But the guys received the challenge to reach bronze rank in just 30 minutes, with a generous reward of 500,000 won. The protagonist agreed without hesitation and accepted this difficult task at first glance. The commentator said the viewers were in for a truly interesting and thrilling show. Finally, the protagonist found his first opponent, who was standing right in front of him. The commentator noticed an interesting detail. It turned out that this time the hero decided to use a completely new weapon that the guys had not seen before. The hero calmly drew his weapon, while his overconfident opponent assumed he could win easily if he simply kept his distance. The hero's rival immediately burst into motion and was about to use his powerful magic skill, but in the very same second his face was split in two and the protagonist was already behind him. The fight ended so instantly that the opponent didn't even have time to realize what had happened. Woohyun showed absolutely no emotion, as if this were a completely expected and natural result. The next round began, and right at the start, the player immediately started complaining that he had been matched against a monster, and he shouted that he was simply surrendering. Then came the second match, where the hero blocked the enemy's attack with his usual ease. This opponent suffered the same fate as the previous contender, losing quickly because the hero finished him with a single precise strike. In the next match, a man who used fist techniques stepped out against the protagonist, but unfortunately, the exact same sad fate awaited him. In the fourth match, everything repeated again, and in the rest of the games, the script didn't change either. The people in the studio were in complete shock, because the total time the protagonist needed to finish 10 games with unquestionable victories was a pathetic 20 minutes. Woohyun raised his rank from normal to bronze with incredible ease, in record time. The commentators were literally speechless and didn't know how to even comment on it, because what was happening on the screen seemed beyond the limits of what was possible. The man noted that the most amazing thing lay in the hero's opponents. Usually, players had a few uncomfortable matchups that were hard for them to play against, but the protagonist didn't care at all about the builds and tactics of other players. It didn't stop him in the slightest from ending matches in a matter of seconds. The commentators were insanely curious how the hero would perform in the upcoming ranked games. However, the man worried that because this was a live broadcast, haters could easily stream snipe Fion. but he sincerely hoped he was worrying for nothing and that incidents like that could be avoided. Woo Hyun's 11th duel began. The opponent immediately got excited that he had managed to get into the same game as the hero. Brazenly, the bastard demanded that everyone watch closely as he humiliated the protagonist right now. The main hero silently began drawing his weapon, and the commentators were pleasantly surprised that he coldly ignored the cheap provocation. The girl said that beforehand she had asked the hero to simply let any words from opponents go in one ear and out the other. Meanwhile, the fight began with the enemy player charging his body with a huge amount of electrical discharges. He immediately burst forward at inhuman speed. Then he unleashed a hail of insanely fast attacks at the hero, who, with soul-chilling ease, dodged every single one. Woo Hyun thought to himself that at first he wanted to give this guy a chance because he seemed quite confident in his skills. But now he abruptly changed his mind and immediately ended the fight with an incredibly precise and deadly blade strike. The defeated bastard said that Woo Hyun was a real monster. And the next round began right away. The male opponent understood that at this pace he would simply lose, so he was going to use something illegal. The atmosphere around the player instantly changed into something completely sinister. Woo Hyun understood perfectly that this fight would be radically different from the previous round, so he instantly dodged the opponent's unbelievably fast attacks. Woo Hyun noted that this man's movements had become just as efficient and precise as those of Etienne's robot. While the enemy started screaming hysterically that now he would show his tormentor his true power, he kept attacking furiously, claiming that in the previous round he had only been holding back. It seemed it was fairly difficult for Woo Hyun to block those unnaturally rapid attacks. At that moment, the girl remembered that she had asked Woo Hyun one favor: if he ever ran into someone who would call him Peter, to destroy him without any mercy. Woo Hyun's face immediately changed, becoming cruel and resolute, because he was going to fulfill his friend's instruction exactly. The opponent's intuition was practically screaming that something was wrong with the protagonist, but he stubbornly kept calming himself with arrogant thoughts, believing that even in theory, he could not lose this match now. In a single instant, the player appeared right in front of the hero, ready to deliver an incredibly powerful blow while also shouting insults, telling the hero not to show off in front of him. However, the protagonist immediately burst from his spot and, with a lightning-fast motion, wounded his restless opponent on the spot. Complete confusion was clearly written across the player's face because such speed and reaction seemed absolutely impossible to him. The opponent tried to counterattack, but Woo Hyun was already behind him again and mercilessly deprived the insolent guy of his arm. The guy began screaming with all his strength, still trying to attack back. But this time too, bitter failure awaited him. Next, he lost his second arm as well. Tears appeared on the opponent's face from pain and humiliation. Blood continued to spray straight toward the camera, and the commentators seemed to finally realize one important fact. They understood that Woo Hyun was deliberately not finishing his enemy off so he could properly punish him and teach him a lesson. The girl was worried, because it was she who had advised fully destroying and humiliating those who baselessly called the hero Peter. The bastard completely lost the ability to move, and in terror, asked who this hero even was if he was capable of such skill. The protagonist decided that instead of extra words, he would make everything much simpler, and he immediately ended this drawn-out fight with a strong final swing of his blade. After that notable event, the hero continued his matches and easily earned a streak of 30 lightning-fast wins in a row. The commentators were in complete shock at what they had seen, because Woo Hyun had already reached gold rank, which clearly went beyond their boldest assumptions. The girl saw a message in the chat where one of the viewers asked the hero to share his build. She asked the protagonist for permission, but he didn't give a damn about secrecy and approved it. With undisguised excitement, his friend delighted the audience by saying that Woo Hyun had allowed them to show his build. After that, the guy said goodbye to the audience and ended the broadcast. The man watching the stream was thrilled with what they had accomplished. They had identified a fully adaptive artificial intelligence, witnessed 30 wins in a row in PvP mode, and even received the hero's promise to reveal his build. The girl assumed that at this pace, Woo Hyun could break the record for consecutive wins. To which the man replied that the current record belonged to the famous Hitler, 76 wins in a row. With all her heart, his friend hoped that in the end, Woo Hyun would still be able to break that seemingly insane record. The man also suggested that Hitler was already watching Ion's success, since he was a very competitive and ambitious player. Meanwhile, Hitler himself nervously dragged his mouse across the desk. He kept reading the information. The entire wave of hype that was directed at the hero, the new rising star of the game. There was also information that Woo Hyun had dueled a real Peter and defeated him with ease, which of course greatly intrigued the pro player. He also saw a comment saying that even the great Hitler wouldn't be able to defeat Ion, and the pro genuinely got angry. A few days later, it was time for the second stream, but what bothered the hero was that the mysterious anonymous viewer still had not appeared on the last broadcast. A beautiful girl waved at the hero, asking the trainee to come over to her, and Woo Hyun was sincerely surprised that even on his first serious mission, he didn't feel nervous at all. He was happy that he had successfully skipped the boring training stages and immediately moved on to a full practical assignment. Woo Hyun asked what the objective of the mission was. It was to destroy the monsters and seal the unstable space. The girl complained that this was another problem site that the corporate league had abandoned. She said that as soon as that organization stopped seeing profit, it immediately walked away from such facilities. The creatures the trainee would have to face were low-rank insects, but even so, they should never be underestimated. A soldier guarding the perimeter greeted them, assuming they were the awakened ones that management had sent. The girl showed the necessary documents while also saying that she greatly appreciated these people's hard work. They began entering the building, and right in front of them was a huge portal. The girl admitted that she was seeing portals for the first time on the grounds of an abandoned factory. Now he understood why this place had immediately seemed vaguely familiar. He had seen places like this in that other world, and back then it was definitely medium-sized, not small as it was being described now. The girl pulled the hero out of his thoughts and suggested they not delay and set off. Suddenly, another awakened one appeared, someone Yujin knew, and he was closely tied to the corporations. The girl sincerely didn't understand what this man was doing in a place like this, while he said that he himself hadn't expected his mission to overlap with the Bureau's interests. Yujin visibly grew worried because the corporations had previously abandoned this building, and now, all of a sudden, they had changed their minds and sent their people here. The man immediately shifted his close attention to the hero, correctly guessing that this was a rookie from the Bureau. He insistently advised the protagonist not to waste his precious time working for the Bureau and to go straight to work for the wealthy corporations. The girl coldly warned him at once not to dare cross the line. In the end, he had no choice but to back off. He decided to leave and hypocritically said goodbye to them. The hero became curious who that unpleasant person was, and Jin admitted that he had previously been her trainee. She also said that the man not only left the Bureau, but also actively spread nasty rumors about the organization. The commentators were amazed at how unexpectedly the complicated relationship between those two was being revealed. The viewer man was happy that thanks to this advanced adaptiveness, they could see a much deeper story than before. The girl suggested that the hero stop the empty chatter and go do their actual mission, and the hero agreed. Meanwhile, outside the door, the corporate man immediately realized that the two of them had entered the portal. With a cruel expression, he told his allies that it was time for them to start acting. About 20 minutes passed, and the main events were now unfolding inside the portal itself. The protagonist wiped blood from his cheek, and right in front of him lay a lifeless body covered in terrible wounds, and nearby lay a candy that was surrounded by puddles of bright blood. A short while earlier, as soon as they entered the portal, they found themselves in a strange space where there was another passage ahead, which led directly to Reverse Planet. Moving forward, the hero thought that portals worked exactly the same way in both worlds, when suddenly the entire space around them began shaking violently, as if from a powerful earthquake. Woo Hyun immediately understood what was happening. It was a rare spatial phenomenon. The girl shouted, worried about the protagonist. She was genuinely concerned for the inexperienced guy, because the situation was becoming critically dangerous. Literally a moment later, the surroundings changed completely. Woo Hyun found himself standing in proud solitude, shocked that they had been scattered into different parts of the location. The hero instinctively grabbed for his knife, thinking that this happened to him fairly often, and immediately discovered that he was already surrounded by a huge number of aggressive spiders. Woo Hyun was fully confident in himself and his strength, so he kept his blade at the ready. Meanwhile, the girl charged her hand with a massive amount of lightning-like electric discharges. She immediately attacked a huge swarm of monsters, and they lost their pathetic lives to strikes of such power. This battle was very hard for her because the enemies kept advancing in an endless stream. She was worried because this space looked more like a medium-sized reverse planet area rather than a small one, and her intuition kept screaming that something in this place was categorically wrong. Behind her was already that same bastard of a man, ready to strike in a cowardly ambush. Only by sheer luck did the girl notice death approaching and manage to avoid fatal damage, though the attack still grazed her. She tried to counterattack, but the enemy dodged with ease. When the girl demanded to know why he acted so disgusting, the man only briefly called it a secret mission. Soon, accomplices of that bastard began to appear, confirming that it was just a mission. Yujin received a deep wound and understood that fighting in that condition would be incredibly difficult. She immediately cloaked her entire body in crackling lightning and, with all the strength she had left, attacked one of her opponents. The man used a raised stone wall to block the strike, but the stone shattered into tiny pieces, violently throwing him backward. That was exactly the effect Yujin wanted, and she immediately used the moment to start running away. The bastard, flying into a rage, chased after the girl while she kept running with the last of her strength. Yujin clasped her hands, charged them with electricity again, and then began forming a mighty thunder spear in her palms. She gripped it tightly and instantly launched the destructive attack toward her pursuers. The spear struck right in front of them, forcing the bastards to break sharply. That gave the girl a chance to widen the gap even more, and she spotted a rescue pit. The men lost her from sight, but kept running in roughly the same direction. They couldn't find Yujin, who at that very moment was holding her breath and hiding in that very pit. The girl understood perfectly that if it hadn't been for that hole in the ground, she would have died for sure. Meanwhile, the protagonist was surrounded by countless corpses of defeated monsters, and he was worried because he could sense the girl's presence somewhere nearby. But she wasn't visible, which made the hero think that something had definitely happened to her. Suddenly, the protagonist heard the girl's voice screaming hysterically. He immediately rushed toward the sound and moved at truly monstrous speed, deeply worried for his comrade. It turned out that Yujin had been seized by a giant monster and was in real mortal danger. Without the slightest hesitation, he prepared to strike and instantly ended the life of that filthy monster, then deftly caught the falling girl in his arms. The hero anxiously asked whether Yujin was all right, but she couldn't answer, yet it was obvious that her injuries were serious. The protagonist couldn't believe that such an experienced girl could lose to some random creep. He understood perfectly that these wounds were caused by a completely different source. Woo Hyun immediately realized it was that same corporate bastard, and the girl weakly confirmed his suspicion. Meanwhile, the live broadcast continued, and the hero's friend watching it didn't understand what the hell was going on the screen. It turned out the normal storyline was unfolding completely differently, and she assumed such an unexpected outcome could have been caused by the artificial intelligence's actions. Inside the game, the girl worried about their uncertain future because she would no longer be able to fight those men due to her severe wounds. She begged the hero to leave this place first, but he told her to hide because he firmly intended to kill that bastard. Yujin shouted that the hero shouldn't act so recklessly because the enemy was a veteran hunter and a rookie had no chance at all. Woo Hyun confidently said he would be fine because he had a perfect plan. Meanwhile, the bastards in the forest complained that the girl had simply vanished. The man ordered his allies to search along the stream, since the wounded girl clearly couldn't have gone far. When suddenly, he felt someone else's presence and immediately attacked the unknown person. It turned out to be a wolf cub who was crying and begging the man to stop. The bastard recognized the hero because he was that trainee, Woo Hyun. Like a true professional actor, Woo Hyun played the role, pretending he was lost and scared. The man assumed the naive hero didn't understand anything about what was happening and immediately prepared to attack to eliminate the witness. But a moment later, Woo Hyun drove his blade straight into the heart of that insolent bastard. With his last strength, the dying man called the hero a bastard. His comrades didn't understand what had just happened. Meanwhile, the hero had already managed to hide in the forest, skillfully taking advantage of the commotion that had broken out. In the end, one of the bastards rushed into pursuit, while the second tried unsuccessfully to save his comrade. The man ended up deep in the woods while Woo Hyun watched him from the top of a tall tree. The man had no idea where the protagonist was, while Woo Hyun was already right behind him, without making a single sound. A moment later, the hero was right up close, and his cold knife was already pressed against the enemy's neck. The last enemy tried to save his comrade's life, when metal flashed from the forest, and an instant later the weapon drove into the man's already wounded body. The enemy screamed, calling the protagonist a crazy bastard, while the hero slowly approached with a completely cold, emotionless expression. In panic, the enemy couldn't understand where his comrade had gone, the one who had chased Ken into the forest. The protagonist simply raised the sword in his hands. It was the very sword that had belonged to the man who had fallen to the hero moments earlier. The enemy flew into blind rage because in just a few minutes he had lost 2 of his comrades. He immediately unleashed an earth element magical attack at Woo Hyun, but the hero avoided the damage with unnatural ease. The opponent prepared something even stronger, and the ground instantly began to shift and surge. It was a technique called earthquake. The hero noticed something important and immediately snapped the tree next to him. He braced the broken trunk against an intact one, using it as support, and with minimal effort, he neutralized the enemy's technique. The opponent screamed, calling the guy a real monster. For a moment, he stayed behind his improvised cover, and at the very last second, Woo Hyun dodged a sudden attack called Stone Spike. Even so, the power of that skill caught him off guard, and he ended up with a wound on his arm. The enemy launched another barrage of attacks, while Woo Hyun steadied his blades for the decisive strike. The protagonist easily knocked aside everything sent his way, then finally ended the bastard with a swift strike from his twin blades. Even in his final moments, the opponent couldn't believe what had happened, while the audience watching the fight sincerely considered the hero a true pro. His friend simply couldn't believe what she was seeing. The hero had defeated such strong and experienced opponents using only a single combat element. Woo Hyun glanced at his wound, fully realizing that compared to his life in the other world, he was still too weak now, even though his skills and experience remain. After that, the protagonist walked up to the enemy's bodies to search them. He read the messages on the bastard's phone, and there was a clear order: bring the girl in, alive or dead. Woo Hyun planned to leave the final investigation to the bureau, but he still took valuable trophies: the return dagger, the victor's bracelet, and the hermit's necklace. He was glad the system let him instantly learn an item's effects, because in the other world, you had to discover what artifacts did through bitter personal experience. The hero stored the items inside his inventory's inner space, and he had to hurry because he wanted to clear this reverse planet as quickly as possible. The girl's wounds were getting worse by the minute. Meanwhile, the girl was in complete shock at what she saw right in front of her. An unbelievably huge monster towered over her, terrifying by its very presence, and Jane understood they had been incredibly unlucky. Already accepting her imminent death, and at least glad the creature had appeared near her rather than near Woo Hyun, the monster launched a rapid assault. The girl also prepared to strike back with all the strength she had left. Their attacks rushed toward each other at tremendous speed, but at the last moment, the giant monster's massive body veered aside, and that saved her life. A shadow rose above the fallen creature. It was Woo Hyun, who asked in a rough tone whether she was all right. Jin was stunned by what was happening, because the hero had not only dealt with the corporate hunters, he had also taken down this strongest creature all by himself. At last, cracks spread across the entire reverse planet, and it began to collapse. The hero told Yujin to climb onto his back because they needed to get out as fast as possible. Woo Hyun carried her on his back and told her to hold on tight. They immediately headed for the portal, the only exit from that dangerous place. Sometime later at Bureau headquarters, the department chief asked if it was true that other people had attacked the girl in an ambush. Woo Hyun confirmed it, and Kim angrily cursed those damn corporations out loud. The hero surprised him by saying he had personally killed the bastard, and Kim first froze, then recalled the circumstances of their very first meeting. The protagonist handed over the attacker's phone as key evidence, since all the messages were saved there. Kim said that with this proof, they could investigate quickly, and he ordered the hero to go rest. Suddenly, he asked the protagonist to stop. He said they would still have a chance to talk, and he sincerely asked Woo Hyun to calm down because he was truly worried about him. In the end, the hero simply agreed, and the mission was officially completed. The commentator said this extreme mission had been incredibly engaging and packed with events. The girl was in complete shock at what she saw at the very end. The anonymous viewer number 62 sent a generous donation, saying the hero had successfully passed his tests. Thank you very much for watching this video, and for your support as well. The next part will come out as soon as the required number of chapters is built up. Soon, I will start publishing the new one. I hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.